Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, another day has gone by, which means another change in the Kyrie Irving saga. Now he says, reportedly, he doesn't want to leave Brooklyn at all. What are we supposed to believe here now? That's next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, no matter how you get your podcasts or where you get your podcasts. Always free, never behind a paywall. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. And remember, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to subscribe there. You get the podcast a little early. You get to see some of the fun visual stuff that we're doing. And plus, you get to look at us, which is really a benefit for everyone. So, Adam Silver had some interesting comments, Andy, about player movement and players demanding trades, really talking about Kevin Durant, but stuff that the Lakers are both, I guess, sort of a cautionary tale, but also a historic beneficiary of these types of actions. So we'll try to get to that as the show goes on. But first, well, the sun came up today, Andy. It means something changed in the Kyrie Irving saga. According to the New York Post, Kyrie and Kyrie's folks are saying, hey, we don't want to leave Brooklyn. I'm not even sure we ever did want to leave Brooklyn. We want to stay right here, even if Kevin Durant gets traded.
Yeah, this report in the New York Post includes these quotes. How did we get to this situation about trade when he opted in? The source asked rhetorically. Here's the situation. He opted in, which means he had and he has every intention of playing with the Brooklyn Nets. KD decides he wants out, and now everyone is talking about trading Kyrie, right? Kyrie has not asked for a trade. Now, if the Nets don't want him, that's something totally different. Kyrie has not said he wants a trade. He opted in. So where did the trade conversations come from? Is it because KD requested a trade and now everybody's like, let's trade Kai? Kyrie opted in.
Now, why would Kyrie Irving say these things or team Kyrie? I mean, I could answer that first question that they're asking there, Andy, about where this came from. Hey, he opted in. He didn't opt in because he wanted to play for the Nets in perpetuity. He opted in because it made him an extra $30 million. That's why he opted in. And that's why the questions about him being traded haven't gone away. Am I missing something, Andy, in that equation? Or do you think I've got it about right?
Well, you're missing the additional detail of before he eventually opted in because he did not want to light that $30 million on fire on top of all the other money that he's lit on fire over the last season between games missed, the severed ties with Nike, all that stuff. He had been trying to get traded before he opted in. So it's not like he was waffling back and forth about, do I opt in? Do I not opt in? It was something about the contract set up with Brooklyn, but he wanted to stay there. He had been trying to potentially get signed and traded somewhere else or opting in, moving on. Like he had wanted to leave Brooklyn. Like
he was upset with Brooklyn's lack of commitment to him.
Right. Which, I mean, I understand that commitment is a two-way street, and Kyrie clearly held up his end of the bargain, not just last season, but really his whole time in Brooklyn. So yeah. I understand where Kyrie had been upset about this situation. Later in this piece, I'm reading, when asked if Irving was also willing to play for the Nets, despite the team having had multiple rounds of talks with the Lakers, the source said he was, and that includes even if Durant is traded away. Quote, Kyrie wants to play, he wants to win a championship, and he wants to play. Here's the thing, by the way, this is my own addendum to this. When it comes to the idea of emphasizing that Kyrie wants to play, it is worth saying twice. The source told the Post, adding that Irving and Durant are friends and supportive of each other, but not necessarily tied at the hip. Quote, I think when KD said he wanted to trade, he didn't say, I am going to trade to where Kyrie goes. End quote. He wants to play, Brian. He wants to play. That was emphasized twice. He wants to play
twice. I mean,
it never hurts to make that clear with Kyrie. He wants to play.
Because I mean, what normally you assume that's a given. Like wants to play basketball is a given for, a guy who is a professional basketball player in the NBA with a gigantic contract wants to play. Like that should be the starting point. I mean, look, I will tell you this. We've been through, you and I are veterans of this industry, of this stage of the NBA offseason where the rumor mill starts to grind. These things take a while. We went through it with Kobe. We've gone through it with LeBron.
We covered the highest profile trade request maybe in NBA history. We were all over that one.
And so, I get it. I understand that these are leaks. These are all things that are designed. They designed to change the conversation, designed to change the leverage, designed to change perception of a player. It's all politicking here. And none of it, on the one hand, should be taken so seriously that you say, well, this is a game changer. Kyrie doesn't even want to be traded anymore.
Yeah, slow down, people.
Right. So they also say, look, if the Nets don't want him, and Kyrie would move. I mean, it's okay between wink, nick, nudge, between you and me.
Well, like this source said,
play somewhere else. We got to play.
Like this source said, if they want to move Kyrie, I mean, nothing we can do about that. Once he opted in, he was completely under Brooklyn's control. At this point, you could argue Kyrie he's really a prisoner of the moment, Brian.
Yeah, he's just a passenger on the good ship Brooklyn.
You know what he is? He's just
decided to throw him overboard.
He's just like Joe Q worker around this country that occasionally gets transferred. That happens to working stiffs all over this country. Yep.
What this strikes me as, Andy, is an opportunity for Kyrie, who has not had many moments save, the Freedom Caucus to be popular, I think, over the last year. I mean, honestly, even Nets fans who are anti-vax were probably many, there's a percentage of them still wanted him to play so their team could win. I mean, I think, the solidarity ends at my season tickets being less valuable. This feels like an opportunity for Kyrie to kind of try to do a little image rehab here and say, well, wait, Kevin Durant, who has no reason to ask out, look at what he's doing with 4 years left on his contract. Me, Kyrie Irving, I'm just a guy who wants to play basketball. I'm here for the Nets, who now that I've opted in, we are all on the same team. We are rowing the boat in the same direction. Look at me, Kyrie Irving, good citizen of Brooklyn. I mean, that was my reaction to seeing this. And it is one of the reasons I find Kyrie and Team Kyrie completely insufferable. And even though I am still hoping that he ends up in Los Angeles, because it makes the Lakers better this year, assuming they don't do anything wildly stupid to get him here. There's a lot about it I am not looking forward to. And stuff like this is part of it.
Obviously, this is a heavy, heavy degree of spin and image rehab and stuff like that you were talking about, because these rumors of Kyrie wanting out and wanting to go to the Lakers have been, how long have we been talking about this every single damn day on this show? Like, at least a couple weeks. Like, he's had a while to respond if he was like, the hell did this come from? I opted in to be a Net. I don't understand why all of a sudden I'm going to the Lakers. I want to be a Net. Like, he's had a couple weeks to put this out if he wanted to. So it's strange that all of a sudden this source decided to leak it. Maybe, Brian, this is Kyrie, because we know Kyrie is a very expansive, deep thinker. He sees the four-dimensional chessboard better and different than the rest of us pawns out here. Pawns, you can take that a few different ways. Maybe he's trying to get LeBron to force his way to Brooklyn. Like, because LeBron wants to play with Kyrie. If LeBron thinks Kyrie's not going to leave, maybe LeBron forces his way to the Nets. Kyrie turning the tables on all of this because, again, he's an expansive thinker.
Yeah. What is he, like one of those guys who leads us into tomorrow or something like that? I forget. It's like Epcot. So there's a strong Epcot center vibe here to Kyrie's philosophical
timely
leanings.
reference.
But all right, so a couple morals of this story, but then Adam Silver was speaking about the Kevin Durant situation, and had some things to say about this that are highly relevant, not just for the Lakers this year and how this resolves, which is ultimately, I think, directly related to what happens to Kyrie and whether or not he ends up in LA, but really related to how the Lakers operate, how they have operated, and how they might operate going forward. So we'll get into that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by RockAuto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you would need in a traditional chain storefront. And who cares? Because why would anybody want to go spend 30, 50, 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway, getting talked down to by some shady salesperson openly treating you like the sucker, the fool, the mark that he really thinks that you are? Because that salesperson knows you can get it for way less at rockauto.com. For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 on average at a chain store, only $216 at Rock Auto. They are a family business, rockauto.com. They have been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. So whether it's for a classic or daily driver, get everything that you need in just a few easy clicks. It comes directly to your door. It's perfect for the hermits out there like me. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
All right, Andy, we're in an era now where you are doing all kinds of different things. You're going to, a business meeting in the morning. You might be going on a hike or, doing something outside, playing with your kids, whatever it is. You need clothes that are going to adapt to whatever it is that you're doing. You need lifestyle clothing that crosses different lifestyles. And that's why we're excited to talk about Doer. They're a new partner of the show. Doer, Duer, a partner of ours here at Locked On Lakers. These guys make the most incredible clothes that are also incredibly versatile. I love them. I have a pair of the jeans. I have a pair of the Live Free Adventure pants. I have the No Sweat jogger. I got a polo shirt, which I wear for work stuff on Zoom all the time now. You got to go try this stuff on. If you're in LA, you go to 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. You can walk into the store. You can try it on. You can feel it. You can understand what we mean when we say this stuff is incredibly comfortable. You'll get it once you have seen the stuff. If you can't go in there, though, you go to shopdoer.com and you order it there. And if you use our discount code, whether in the store or online at shopdoer.com, locked on 15, you get 15% off of your order. Again, 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. If you're in LA, you go in there, you try the stuff on. If you can't, shopdoer.com. Regardless, 15% off if you use locked on 15 as a discount code. It's shopdoer.com or again, 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. Okay, so Adam Silver, Andy, Kevin Durant remains the headliner at any conversation that Adam Silver is going to have. He spoke at a press conference at the NBA's Board of Governors meeting in Vegas, baby. And he was asked about KD, and he said something that isn't terribly shocking. Doesn't really like what Durant is doing. Players asking out with a lot of time left on their contracts. Quote, "We don't like to see players requesting trades and seeing it play out the way it is. The basketball was fantastic this past season. I don't want to be naive, but I would love the focus to be on the play." He said that the league would be trying to find remedies in concert with the Players Association that would prevent this sort of thing from happening. Players not asking out early in their contracts. So the next time the league and the Players Association get together to negotiate, some kind of conversation about this situation is almost surely going to come up. This is not a new stance for Adam Silver. He said the same thing when Anthony Davis was on the block and all these other things. It's not good for the league. It's not good for franchises when stars sign big contracts and then quickly ask out of those deals. I'm not sure exactly what can be done from a CBA standpoint, but I do think we have entered an era where the the automatic nature of guys getting these kinds of long-term contracts, whether because people are worried they're going to do what Kevin Durant is doing right now and just decide they want something else, or because players are getting so expensive that they just can't justify the salaries in a salary cap league. I just think the what's happened to the Lakers, what's happened to the Nets is kind of a cautionary tale that's going to change the way the league does business, even if they don't make a new rule for it.
I mean, maybe the flip side is the best players in the league, and the all-star caliber players, the all NBA caliber players, are so valuable. They're always going to command big salaries. Like unless you as a player give a team a reason to be cautious about you, whether you're talking about some of the stuff that Kyrie Irving's done, or whether you're talking about James Harden forcing his way off a few teams, but also the well-documented conditioning / partying issues that have come along with him. I think if you are a player of that caliber that gives a team a reason to be cautious, they're going to jump all over that. But the flip side is, if you don't, at the end of the day, talent always ends up winning out. And I think teams, if they have the opportunity, particularly if the superstar that is already on the team wants you to go after or sign somebody that is available for you, I think more often than not, those guys are still going to be able to get their way and get the money that they want. I think what really complicates it isn't even so much the money, because again, for the most part, the players that the superstar players that we're really talking about, for the most part, I get why they get paid what they do. Like even somebody like a Bradley Beal, for example, who's making like $1 billion a year now with Washington and the contract that he signed, no trade clause, whatever. Like Bradley Beal is not good enough to elevate the Wizards past a certain point, but he's also a really good player. So he puts a team like the Wizards in a very difficult situation. And players of Bradley Beal's caliber, though, I think are all, especially for somebody like Beal, that, injuries aside, has never given a team any character reasons or anything like that to worry about with him, or dedication issues, things like that. I think what the league really is just worried about is the instability that comes with these guys signing a deal, and the minute they sign the deal, start looking around for the next place that they can go.
And I think that's, and like the teams, unless the only way you could have a rule where like the players can't ask out is if teams can't suddenly trade these guys, 6 months later or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Until that happens,
what the Clippers did to Blake Griffin.
I am certainly sympathetic to the players' side here, but I think Beal is a great example. What you said, you started that statement with players who are that good, players who are good enough, and so part of it is teams are reevaluating, I think, and taking a much harder look at, okay, what really is the value and the tier, the talent level of James Harden? Is he really right and truly one of those dudes that you can just put on a team, into his 30s and just expect to get great results, like LeBron, like Kevin Durant, like Steph Curry? And the answer is no, I think, at this point. And Philadelphia made the decision to pay him that way. Kyrie is not getting the bites commensurate with his talent necessarily because, waves hands around all this. Guys like Beal, I think, is a great example of team needs and player wants kind of matching with each other. You're right. Washington, Bradley Beal, would I be comfortable giving him that kind of money? Not really, because I love Beal, but he's never elevated a franchise in that same way. Washington clearly believes that they could not possibly draw another player of his caliber there, and so they're going to pay him and keep him and at least take care of their star. Okay. I also don't think Bradley Beal is the type of guy who's going to then try to force his way out, because I don't think there are a lot of places he could go. Damian Lillard has has his own reasons for wanting to stay in Portland for a long time. Portland has reasons to keep him there for a long time. And the odds of Lillard, after all this stuff, a year and a half from now, trying to force his way out of Portland, I think are pretty small. So
I agree.
I think there's this sort of push-pull here of to where if you're going to give that kind of money to someone, it's going to be for some, that kind of contract is going to it may not be spoken, but it's kind of understood with certain tiers of players. But guys like KD, guys like James Harden, guys who are in that sort of super elite, but maybe moving their way out. That's where it gets really complicated. And what I'm fascinated by is how this changes the way the Lakers potentially do business, because they were on the good side of this from their perspective when Anthony Davis tried to force his way out of New Orleans. I think with good cause. He gave them 7 years? It was enough time, and he had no obligation to stay there any longer. And then now the Lakers have seen the bad part of it with stacking up stars that are moving around this way. And I wonder how they'll operate. Maybe we can talk about this next. Like, how does the world change? How do the Lakers change in a world where teams are more cautious about stars. Teams are more cautious about who they're giving it up, for. And, Russell Westbrook really worth moving heaven and earth for, because we're taking a much harder look at what our stars actually are. I would love to understand how that impacts the entire Lakers model of doing business. So maybe I'll ask you that question next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, podcasts, news, etc., including baseball, boxing, MMA, NFL futures, NBA futures, everything. It is never too early to start betting on the 2023 NBA champions. At last glance, the Boston Celtics, who lost in the finals, they are the clubhouse leader over at Bet Online, followed by the Bucks. And you got the Warriors very close. The Lakers, 10-1 odds. Clearly, Vegas is either counting on something happening big for the Lakers, or just counting on the fact that people will always bet on the Lakers. The casuals, Brian, as we like to call them. Bet Online is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the games start.
This conversation about Russ and the Lakers and the model going forward is kind of related in some ways to the Athletic, and Seth Partnow has his something he's now doing annually, breaking players up into tiers, kind of a way of ranking players through about like 100 and top 150 or whatever it is in the league. 125. Thank you. And the methodology is very specific, and you got to go read it. And we don't need to lay the whole thing out here. But the point being that the Lakers mortgaged basically whatever was left in their future, I think it's fair to say, to bring in Russell Westbrook, based on the idea that Westbrook was a transcendent star. And in these rankings, he is 114th, I believe.
114th. Yeah, and it's
in tier 5. Right.
Tier 5,
he's in the fifth tier of NBA players.
Right, the fifth tier of NBA players, and Seth only goes through tier 5. And he also emphasized that it is not a strict numerical ranking. So Russ coming in at 114, I think you could look at it maybe in certain ways through the methodology or eye test, whatever you value, and, think of him as, say, 95th or, 90th, whatever. But he is roughly, and I think fairly, in that tier of top, 85 to 125 players in the league, which puts you roughly in the upper quarter of players in the league, which means you are better than the majority of the league. But it also places you well below the tiers of players who are considered the biggest difference makers, or, the best fits, the most easy to blend with a team, all that sort of stuff. When you're in tier 5, you have value, you have talent, but you are not at a level where you become incredibly desirable among, or in all circumstances. You're certainly not considered
Right.
at a superstar level.
Right. And even if you look at these rankings again, go to The Athletic, check them out, check out the methodology and all that stuff. Maybe you think, he belongs a tier up, which is sort of roughly 40 to 80, like in there. But I don't think there's any tiering system, any ranking system or anything where you would take Russell Westbrook and you would put him in that in any of the real upper tiers of NBA players anymore, short of a bounce back season. And what strikes me about this relative to the conversation we were having there is that the Lakers made a fundamental miscalculation just on what Westbrook is at this point in his career. They also miscalculated the fit. They miscalculated about 10 other things in this process. And I wonder if this changes at all how they look at players, how they look at future transactions, if they're going to learn from this and it would make them more cautious about just assuming that their stars are stars, will be stars, and shall remain stars kind of in perpetuity, without lifting under the hood a little bit more. I just, because that's historically how they've kind of done business, or at least how I think they've done business.
It's really hard to know, Brian, because we're still in the middle of where they are right now. But look, their interest in Kyrie Irving, who has given you plenty of reasons to be cautious about bringing him into your team, despite the fact that he is a better fit than Russell Westbrook, there are reasons to be apprehensive about it. The fact that they are fairly interested in Kyrie leads one to believe that perhaps their methodology hasn't changed much. I guess the counter to that would be there is some reporting that internally there is more interest in, say, Buddy Hield or Miles Turner, or maybe trying to get both of them and Eric Gordon, like that maybe they are looking a little bit more towards, upper end role players as opposed to a flat out star. The proof may be in the pudding, but
and it needs to be said, there's part of the appeal of Kyrie in this particular context is it undoes at least some of it mitigates the damage that was done by the Russ. At least the thing you get out from under the Russ thing by bringing in Kyrie.
No doubt. Again, he is a better fit, but it's not like you bring in a guy that isn't, he isn't just a superstar. He is a fantastic locker room chemistry guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like you are losing a lot of the superstar politics when you bring in Kyrie Irving. If anything, you are adding more if that guy becomes,
because you set yourself up for a situation where if he plays well, you're like, what do we do now? Like there is a day, Russ, if he plays really well this year, is still not coming back. If he stays with the Lakers and he has a good season, he is not going to be here next year. But as Kyrie, you have to make a choice, and that is tough.
As I say often, Russell Westbrook is a one-year problem max, unless you turn him into something longer. I mean, it's difficult to say in this, also in the sense that I don't consider Rob Pelinka the most creative general manager, basketball ops guy across the league. I also think, though, that in certain respects, not total respects, because you and I have never bought the idea that he was completely against Russell Westbrook, but just got, steamrolled by LeBron and AD and Team Clutch. Like, I don't buy that. But I do think that, we know he liked Buddy Hield last year, and he was about to make a Buddy Hield deal before they ended up reversing course and going to Westbrook. It is difficult to know exactly how much of Pelinka's instincts are at least occasionally there to try to go a little bit more for depth and, a little bit more of a tier system as opposed to being so top loaded with stars. And for one reason or another, maybe even including Jeannie Buss and what she envisions for this organization traditionally, for whatever reason, he can't do completely what he wants to do versus just this is the way the Lakers have always operated, including catering to their stars and in this particular case, we know LeBron wanted Russell Westbrook. We know LeBron wants Kyrie Irving. And we also know the Lakers seemingly would like to keep LeBron on board for a while. Debate the wisdom of that or not, but either way, perhaps bringing in Kyrie is the cost of doing that business. And they are a star-driven business, just like, by the way, all teams are star-driven in the NBA.
But they are. But I think teams are star-driven, but not in the same way. It's a different belief in stars. Like, obviously, Golden State holds on to their stars. Milwaukee is doing what they can. Denver is paying out the rear for Jokic, and they re-signed Murray, and talent is really hard to come by. I'm not
Michael
knocking
Porter
the
Jr.
Lakers
a lot of money.
I'm not trying to knock the idea that the Lakers keep and develop talent, but I am knocking their sense of, I think, what goes into roster building and effectiveness, and quite frankly, to some degree, their ability to evaluate who the stars are. I wonder next year, theoretically, Rob Pelinka is keeping this incredibly clean cap sheet, so the Lakers have Anthony Davis and nothing else, and they can rebuild from there, re-signing, then bringing LeBron, and then do all this cap machinations. Is it to rebuild a roster in a meaningful and coherent way, signing role players and all this stuff into the space that they have, or is it to find one more star, one more max guy that they can go out and give giant money to? We can. It's not a question we can answer here. The thing, and the other thing about this that I think is really hard is it's the Lakers are in a position where it's really hard to unwind where they are, because they don't have picks and they don't have a lot of young talent. They're kind of left with only one avenue. But as the league evolves, and the Lakers are a cautionary tale, Brooklyn is a cautionary tale, teams that I think to some degree even players might want to find some sort of way to do this in a way that is kind of adds stability, I think, for everyone involved, where everybody wins a little bit. I want to see how the Lakers evolve, because it's been a bad, title aside, it's been a really ugly decade for this team. And what they have done in the past, I just don't think works quite as well in where the league is now and where the league could be going. But anyway, so
I mean, I really quick, I don't think necessarily the biggest problem is that the Lakers are a star effort organization, even though they are decidedly a star effort organization. I think the bigger problem is actually they just have no patience to build anything. If they were star efforts, but actually had patience in the way they went about acquiring or actually nurturing stars, they could be in much better shape. The problem is they're just extremely impatient with their star efforty, and that can be a really bad combination.
All right. So there were a couple other things that were intriguing about these tiered rankings from Seth Partnow up at The Athletic. That we'll get into for Thursday's show, right? That's what's coming up next.
Correct.
And I'm sure something else will happen with this whole Kyrie and KD derby between now and then. So again, reminder: Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast generally a little bit early. Locked On Lakers, make us your first listen of every day. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. ShopDoer.com is where you should go get pants, because they are incredibly comfortable. See everybody on Thursday.